I wanted to sit down with just like, we have amazing conversation in here anyway, with just like when we're not making music. So I thought, why don't I just like whack a camera on and reason? And I don't know what to do, because I don't want to be like, F you, you speak. But they're quiet, man, and it's not it. 99% of this comes from a community and a voice of the voiceless. So a lot of people who profit off this art, the root of it is pain.
Greediness does exist. There are a lot of greedy people in the music everywhere. But why are they greedy? Because that's how the economy is set up.
And this kind of like mental like brainwashing, like you were saying, by our media and our government, that these bodies and these people don't matter, they're so connected.
Now, why is it winding me up? Is it winding me up because I understand the roots? Or is it winding me up because they don't want to rock the boat of what could be exposed under that?
You're in the Steeze Factory now.
Steeze Factory Settings, simple proceedings. I'm sitting here with beautiful people that I've met. Often we chat great things anyway, but sometimes I'll just whack camera on. Shout out to OBP. Today I have a regular Gaia.
Hello.
Don't leave me hanging. Yes, I am.
Hi.
The great G33, part of the amazing Girls Don't Sink family. So if you've been to a festival in the last 5 years, you have danced to her music, whether you know or care.
Her.
And then someone I've watched via social media who has become a superhero to me already in such a short period of time. And I'm so honoured to have her here today. And we'll go into why now. But we need to just make noise for Fiona Lali and Andy. All right, man, come on. Yeah. Go. See it there. So Fiona, welcome to the space.
I'll come every day.
You're welcome anytime.
I'll come every day.
I think it's evident we're in a very strange time in the world. And I think a lot of us are probably more active or open to certain aspects of what you would call politics more than ever. I'll just start with my little take on everything so that it makes sense to anyone who's watching it, who's normally seeing a musician. This room birthed Kneecap's fine art album. So it was people, they were laid on the floor writing lyrics. They were, going to the drink shop and bringing it back. Like I was immersed with these fantastic human beings for a very intense amount of time. And through that process, I got to know them like family. And I've seen them go from writing something on a piece of paper on that sofa all the way to end up going to court for a terror charge. And seeing that kind of like humanity and the defrosting of the system in front of me has been really scary, but something that has actually made me want to kind of like delve deeper into what you might call politics. And that's why I think it's important we have this conversation today to just like amplify that, yeah, I might not be, on telly or next to this person, but we are all involved whether we know it or not. And Gaia is a G, bad girl selector, who has been spreading these vibrations for time. And Fiona is someone I've watched who really, really just amplifies what I think in a very articulate way. So G, nice. Walk one.
Hello. Honestly, we came in a little bit earlier for context, and me and Fiona had a little chat for like 40 minutes, and I wish we would have hit record from then.
Yeah.
I felt like we also like, there's
better.
so many like similarities. How old are you, 26?
27.
27, same. There's so many like similarities and just like things that we were talking about. And I think, we were talking about even, your latest guests, Elsie and Jordan, and like this place being a hub to kind of cultivate those kind of conversations, but also put them at the forefront of people that, are able to see these artists kind of like stripped back in a way. And I know that you've done so many podcasts and interviews and, shows that are so academic and so like forward facing. So I feel like it's nice for us, like the likes of me and you, to be like inspired by, Fiona and her stance and her presence, but also the other way around. And I can't believe that you even felt a tiny bit nervous about this, because I was like, this is going to be a right laugh. This is going to be so chill compared to the kind of like environments that you've been in. And, we've all seen them. And I was, just before we started filming, I was asking you like, how did you even get to be on like GB News? And she was like, they're calling me all the time. And I think there's this like need that people want to see you and people want to listen to you. And me and T are probably like at the forefront of that fan base, 1000%.
So for anyone who's tuning in and not entirely sure who you are, what you do, who is Fiona?
Okay, so first of all, I say I'm a communist. I'm a part of the Revolutionary Communist Party. And the reason that I was a bit nervous, but actually really excited to do this, is because we're living through this really powerful moment where there's this immense politicization happening all across the world over Palestine, over so many things. No one is seeing that expressed, and yet musicians are filling that vacuum. And that is why at Glastonbury, or I was saying like at this festival in Denmark the other day, Roskilde, I don't know.
Roskilde, yeah.
Roskilde.
Dog festival. Yeah.
You know, there's this yearning for someone to just say what we think. And in a small way, that's part of how I've gained a platform is through doing these debates and these interviews. And people are like, yeah, you're actually saying what I think. But then music is another avenue through which that is happening. And it can provoke an even more like emotional response in people, because music and art is, what is it? It's a collection of feelings, it's a collection of emotions.
Definitely.
And to combine these two things through this discussion, I think is really cool, because people want to see what they think reflected in music and art, but also politics. And we've got to find an authentic way for that to happen.
We spoke a lot even before about that kind of like authenticity, or like the role of like good art, and what does good art do and how does it make you feel? It makes you want to speak about it, it makes you want to pass it on, but it should move you in a way. And also like good art, I mean, I went to see Kneecap at Glastonbury. I have a mad story about that. We were a little bit late. It was the Sunday. I'd got a notification on my phone saying Westholtz is locked off. Like, do not bother going now because it's too late. And I was like, there's no way. There's no way.
You had your merch on and everything.
I had my merch on. And then I met my friend Susie Backos. Like, come on. I was literally like to the guy, you've got to let me in. I've got this T-shirt. Like, come on. And we got to the final gate. And I think the guy just probably looked at us and thought, they must be so desperate. And he was like, look, you can go. I don't get paid enough for this. And we went and we ran. We missed a bit of the set. We ran. And when I got there, I took it all in. And then after a while, one of my friends started crying. And then I started crying. And then Susie started crying. And I couldn't believe how consumed I was with emotion at the magnitude. First of all, even from the notification coming up on my phone being like, Westholtz is locked off, Kneecap, please find other alternative acts to go and see at this time. I got a wave of emotion from then, from the beginning of the day, because I was like, like, this is crazy. Exactly. And then being there in that moment, I was like, I almost like couldn't have topped that. The whole day I just felt like this buzz the entire time. And that's the exact same way that I felt when I watched the film. First time I watched the film, I messaged you straight away. I was actually like voice noting you. And I just couldn't believe, first of all, the impact that they've had, but the impact of everybody else that was there. I felt like everyone around me, I was around the right kind of people. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So yeah.
But that defiance you've described of like, we are going to go and see them. That's also why people like Kneecap, is what we were talking about earlier, that when they're attacked, they don't just accept it. They don't just they hit it right back, which is what is great about their music. It's this kind of like aggressive, like, you know, talking to the world. This is what's happening. Yeah.
Love
also
them.
reflective of life and what it's like to grow up in West Belfast and all that kind of stuff. But also, yeah, when I'm not going to accept the establishment politically in the most concentrated form, stopping me from talking about Palestine, but also stopping us from performing or stopping us from, and I think it's not just that they talk about Palestine, because I was thinking about this, like they don't just describe what's happening, they also explain it and say, and this government is helping to facilitate this. And that's also why the establishment don't like them. That's also why they're trying to censor them. It's not just people who describe horrors, but explain it and say, and this is the source of that horror, and this is how the government is complicit and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that militancy, that defiance that you had to see them is like a example of what people want. What they want militancy. They want people who are going to stand up and just say what is.
Also, in a very simple way, we were talking about this as well, like the way that you're writing at the moment, T, I can hear you. You're talking about things, you know, like kind of like, because I felt the same at times, particularly when I left school, that kind of like discomfort of not really being academic, not really knowing where I kind of fit and whatever, and kind of having to rewrite my own relationship with books, because I love books and I love reading and I love learning, but I didn't like learning in the parameters of my school.
Yeah, classic.
And I like many people, and it was only when I left school I was like, oh my God, I've actually got a really like avid interest, and fortunately because of my parents and, you know, the things that they stand for and what they're aligned with, it's all kind of like bled into it. But I think what is so important as well, particularly like the likes of Kneecap, yourself, Fiona, and UT, like the simplicity of being able to explain and for people to digest the reality and the simplicity of what is happening. And it's not kind of like, you know, there's no like scapegoats, there's no like big fancy schmancy words. It is literally just the simple facts of what is happening. Yeah. And I think that's so important for people to understand. And we spoke a little bit about this earlier in terms of like people then using that knowledge to, you know, cultivate their own thoughts into writing and galvanize their own efforts into, you know, writing their own words. You know, I think a lot of people sometimes it can be quite easy to fall behind the kind of comfort of reposting somebody else's words because you might not have that kind of that confidence to find your own words. And I think that's what you do so well. You go out, you speak to people, you speak to young people, you encourage them to speak and to learn. And I think, you know, we've all been young once. If someone tells me not to do something, I'm going to do it. So I think it's about, with young people in this relationship that you have, you work with so many young artists as well, that offering, that invitation and being able to kind of, you know, curate a space that is a comfort in a way of being able to be like, you might not know this, I'm willing to teach you, I'm willing to learn. And I think the more we can kind of like adapt and create those kind of environments, the better. It's not a scorn, it's not a scrutinising, it's not a telling off. It needs to be just like a real honest conversation. And I think that is what the Steeze Factory is doing a very good job at doing at the moment.
I'd like to thank you, Gaia, for my branding sales pitch to anyone that wants to help fund this operation. Money is sparse. We only work with certain brands. BDS is a thing. Fiona, I saw you in the streets with a megaphone shouting. It was beautiful. It was so unapologetic and rightly so. And it reminded me of like your version of rapping.
Yeah.
Honestly, Public Enemy vibes, like F that, like no. You are frontline, you're outside. It's beautiful to watch. I admire you so much, the confidence that you have and the self-belief of what you think and we all believe is right.
She is right.
Yeah, no, yes.
Thanks.
Sorry, that is right. What's it like for you being, like, I know it feels like a bit of a calling to me. Like my background is in what we're talking about, like my parents, my sister. So it's not something I tap in and out of. It's like it's a baton that's passed. I feel like I see that in you. It's like you are here to do this. It must be intimidating at times. It must be scary at times to be so outside. How's your experience with all that going?
Yeah, for sure. I think when you were just saying about like saying what is, it was making me think, there's this quote by Rosa Luxemburg, who's a revolutionary. And she said once, the most revolutionary thing you can do is loudly proclaim what is happening. And that also applies to politics, that applies to what is happening in Palestine right now. It applies to art. Like the most revolutionary art is that what is pushing things forward and is proclaiming what is. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, when you do intimidating things or difficult, like talking about Palestine, you're going to get attacked and all this kind of stuff, fine, whatever. But when you have that conviction that you are proclaiming the truth, then that is the only armor that you need to like navigate that world. And I think that the other thing, and I'm sure Kneecap and other artists probably feel this as well, is I'm very convinced that the majority of people actually support ultimately what I'm saying, right? Which is that, okay, there is a genocide in Palestine. The British government is complicit in it. And the British government is murdering people, not just in Palestine, but they're murdering people in this country as well, every single day, through austerity. And when we connect those two things together, we can convince people in Britain why Palestine matters to them. And so I'm not afraid to stand on the street on a megaphone and say that, because what I'm saying is relevant to you and it's relevant to all of us. And I think that's what connects you with people. Politics is about, the type of politics I believe in is about uniting people. And music does that too. I keep bringing it back to music.
They're all kind of just like unanimous, like they're all connected, like you said, like in their own way. And I think the point that you've made about what's happened in the UK and because I think there's a lot of people that feel like this disconnect, or like I even saw this, I don't know if you saw, I put up my story the other day. I don't even know why I gave it the time of day. This woman chatting, oh, I don't care. Why do I have to go to a football match or a concert or a festival and constantly be lectured about Palestine? And it reminds me of what was happening last summer when there was the rise of those race riots. And I saw a lot of people online saying, why is there a Palestine flag? Like at these kind of like anti-racist like protests, like what's the Palestine flag got to do with it? Everything. What was happening last year, particularly in the UK, this kind of like, this disregard and disconnect of like brown and black identities is exactly what is happening in Palestine. And they are both connected. And this kind of like mental like brainwashing, like you were saying, by our media and our government, that these bodies and these people don't matter. They are so, it's the same thing. It's so like they're so connected. And I just found it so mad to kind of like see all of that unfold, knowing that this was happening. But then I also saw a comment being like, if you're at any of these like protests, even like Pride and anti-racist, any of these like you know, these big protests and you see a Palestine flag, then you should know that you're on the right side of history. And I think that, to me, just spoke volumes because, yeah, it is all connected. And I think what you said is so true. Like, there's so many people that think, oh, we've got enough of our own problems here and we haven't dealt with this, we haven't dealt with that. Our government has the money, they're putting it in the wrong places. Yeah. And it's as simple as that.
I think people feel so alienated. Capitalism is based on this like artificial scarcity that there's not enough money for all of these things in society. So people are like, especially now, there's such a crisis in people's lives and they're desperately trying to get through. And so they attach onto different things. And Palestine, for a whole layer of people, for young people especially, is this like prism through which their anti-establishment feelings are being fractured. And so if a musician finally just says what everyone, it's like this sigh of relief. It's like, oh my God, yeah, I'm not alone in what I'm thinking and feeling and relating to the world. But I think our job is to reach those people who don't see Palestine as relatable to them and prove it. And I think we can do that. I think that there's such a crisis in culture. There's such a crisis in just culture
in access
right
to
now.
culture as well,
And
in terms of
access
like
to culture.
Museums, galleries, like all of these kind of things, like even just like funding, funding for music, for access, for like cultural and artistic education and accessibility, and also even just like nightlife. All of these statistics that I'm seeing about clubs being closed down, and you know they're all struggling. And you know, to me, a club is a cultural landmark just as much as an art gallery or a museum, and they're all vital vessels for people, not just young people, by the way, because I think the clubs especially, it's a cross-generational thing, like going across so many different types of communities as well, ethnicities, like there's so many different kind of like people and communities to kind of like honour in these spaces. So it's not necessarily just a young people thing, but it also is about them finding their livelihood and their identity through these kind of things. And also, we're talking about income and revenue. We're talking about thousands of jobs and like, you know, actual like people at the forefront of like, you know, working on the door, working on the bar. It's not even just about the ravers that are going or the DJs like myself that need to play there. It's about the greater ecosystem when it comes to nightlife. And I found it so interesting, particularly living in Liverpool. Like, I've grown up in London all my life. I moved to Liverpool when I was 19 years old. I've lived there for, how old am I? Someone do the maths. I don't have a maths GCSE.
Don't ask me. How old is she?
How many years have I been in Liverpool?
7 years.
I've been there 7 years. 27.
8 years.
I've been there 8 years. I've been there 8 years.
Go on, Erin.
Nice one.
BP.
But, and also there's so many differences as well. And I'm sure you'll find this, coming from the north and then coming to London, and, you know, all of these different characteristics and these feelings that are so different and so unique. Liverpool as a city is, first of all, its foundations are socialist. Its foundations, you can feel that when you go there, and this kind of like greater, wider community, like there's a collective consciousness there that I don't really feel like in London, because it's not London's fault. It's just, there's so many people, and I love London, and I think there's so many things that London has that Liverpool doesn't have, because Liverpool is quite tiny. But Liverpool has always identified itself as not even being English, that they're like their own entity. And they've gone through so much, even like, you know, Thatcher trying to dismantle them, the likes of Hillsborough. There's been so much trauma in that city that's almost just like, they've just like taken it in, and it's become part of they've got this undeniable energy in this fight. And I really feel like I've been so inspired like from that, and like living in Liverpool and seeing how they react to certain things. And it's interesting because after October 7th, I joined a organisation called Scousers for Palestine, and I've worked with them quite closely over the years. And pretty soon after, we wanted to host a screening of one of my favourite documentaries called 3 Broken Cameras. And in Liverpool, we wanted to go to artistic institutions, like quite critically acclaimed, and nobody wanted to screen it. Nobody wanted to screen it. And what we ended up doing is going and screening in a grassroots club. And it's like, but those are the obvious people. That's the obvious answer and the obvious option that would screen something like that. We didn't want it to go there. We screened at District, which is one of the only black-owned clubs in Liverpool, which is actually where Girls Don't Sink did our first ever event. And it's like, obviously we'd screen it there, but we wanted to take it into those spaces that it needed, like a story like this and a film like this needed to be in. And I found that really difficult at the time, having to deal with that and having to see Liverpool as a city really kind of come together for the likes of, what was happening in Ukraine, but this disassociation with what was happening in Palestine, these kind of more critically acclaimed venues and art institutions, they didn't want to know.
Well, that's the frustration that many of we feel, right? And you see it in micro and maximum ways, the maximum being like, kneecap or going to court, or the minimum way of being like, oh, I don't know, like in my world, it might be like, oh, he speaks about that, so let's not get that artist in with us.
Speaks about that. We said this. They don't want to say Palestine either. They'll just say like the Middle East. Like, the Palestine is like the trigger word. And we were saying like, do you remember when everyone used to say like BAME?
Oh yeah, bloody hell.
Yeah.
Which was just such a lazy way.
What was that? It was black.
Asian, minority, ethnic.
Yeah.
And now, and then there was another one, there was a few amalgamations of the same thing that just basically grouped everyone who wasn't white together. And when I was in drama school, this was a big thing. And it used to piss me off because I'm just like, just call people what they are. I found it so weird, just to group everyone together. It was such a lazy way for white people, essentially, to kind of just group
everyone in that. But Fiona, why, I'm sure she does. Why do you think there's the muting is so evident here in Britain of anyone that wants solidarity with Palestine?
I think right now, from the point of view of the British government, or I would say the ruling class, the establishment, I think they are terrified of the Palestine movement because, kind of like what we were saying earlier, I think probably the sensible wing of them can see that within the Palestine movement is the kernel of something that represents more than just Palestine. It's just absolute disgust and hatred of the system. The recognition that you're murdering people in Palestine and you're murdering people at home. Therefore, if this movement grows, it threatens everything they represent. It threatens their entire system. And so that's why they went so far to try and censor kneecap. That's why the media immediately locked down, unified, okay, Bob Vylan, get him off. It's because there's something in it that I think scares them.
The truth.
And the truth, which is a revolutionary thing, which has the power to mobilize. And
they can feel that. And that's why they're shook.
And it's threatening them. And I think it's interesting because you have all these musicians filling this vacuum, saying what people think and feel and articulating it, also in a slightly different way than all politicians would. I mean, leading a chant at a festival saying death to, it's a different way of nevertheless reflecting what people feel and what people want. And so they don't know how to debate that. So they're just thinking, okay, shut it down. But when they do that, with all of these artists, they've just grown in their popularity, in what people want. And so I think it's a powerful time. What I would want is for all of those artists to get together and do they should do one massive gig. They should do something, there's a platform for, I don't know, artists for revolution. I don't know, something like this. But it would only work if it stayed authentic, right? That's the other reason that people like these people, is because they believe that they're just authentically saying what they feel and they're not reading a script, and that they're not politicians. That's also part of it, because people hate politicians because they're liars. And so I think it's, and I had a question for you both, which is, we were talking about this earlier, the music industry presumably is built on this idea that you want new, fresh, interesting people to come through. But actually that's a bit of a lie because it's new and fresh in a way that is marketable and profitable. And so there's this weird, I don't know, contradiction that I would imagine exists in the music industry, especially if people are political, not because they've thought consciously, I want to be a political artist, but because they're just being truthful in what they think and they feel. And then they're expressing themselves. And so I just think it's this kind of existential question
big time.
Of what are we here for? What is music and what is art? And anyway.
No, it's a mad one.
That is the question. Though.
Yeah, no, big time. I mean, look, the music that we love and stands the test of time has often got that anchor in it.
Of course.
Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, whatever, that's my anchor, right? There's loads more, right? And then something comes along in the modern day and you obviously see and probably feel what they had back in the day, because I'm sure there's certain messages in the records in reggae that the Western lens would have hated.
Even in house music, like the fundamentals, like the origins of electronic music, and that's come from struggle, that's come from protest, that's come from black queer people, like almost just like having to use and utilize music as an extension of their identity, of their struggle, of their crisis. And I think that a lot of people often forget the roots of where this music came from.
That's been really frustrating to me, if I'm honest, is that a lot of us make money off this. Right, I guarantee you 99% of this comes from a community and a voice of the voiceless, right? And then naturally it gets took on and it forms a new version of itself. Drum and bass is the biggest example. It's black British music. If I go to drum and bass rave, the only black people I see are the mic men, right? There's no managers, there's no agents. Like, it's so far removed from the root. House music goes without saying. So a lot of people who profit off this art, the root of it is pain, sufferation, a voice for the voiceless. And a lot of those people right now aren't saying shit. And it's really winding me up. Now, why is it winding me up? Is it winding me up because I understand the roots? Or is it winding me up because they don't want to rock the boat of what could be exposed under that? I don't know, but I'm really disappointed in the music community right now. And I don't know what to do, because I don't want to be like, F you, you speak. But they're quiet, man. And it's not it. We need to stand up for the people that gave us a bloody career in a different way.
I agree. And I think some people are getting bored. And I think what a luxury it is to be able to just scroll casually, because I know you see it, because you post it every day. I post it. I've known many people in the industry that do post it. So what a luxury it must be just to be able to tap and scroll so casually without feeling like even the tiniest bit affected, or even feeling the tiniest bit moved, where you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe that this is the world that I'm living in, and I don't want to do something about it, and I don't want to do anything I can, even in my small capability of whatever, whether I'm, forward facing, whether I'm not, whoever I am as a human being living in this world, that I don't have some capability within my life to speak out or stand against it in any way that I possibly can. And I think what the IDF is doing such a good job at the moment, which is tying into this whole thing, is that they are massacring so consistently that now it's all been blurred into one. It's like that there's no, like, the impact of one atrocity isn't even hitting for people anymore, because they're doing it so vigorously and so regularly that it's all become one big blur. And I think people's silence is kind of like almost just like the product of that. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's just like, it's all kind of like become one big thing. So it's almost like not shocking people, or people are bored of it. And to me, even for me, when I look and when I try and take it in and when I try and stay up to date, I'm always just in disbelief. And I don't know how anybody can't be seeing that kind of stuff, or knowing that it's happening, and also just choosing to not commentate. And it goes back to what we were saying about that knowledge and that understanding of language, but also not just reality, but of history. And the history is actually so simple when you break it down, which is why, for me, hearing people like you and, how you type and how you speak and how you connect to your audience, being able to break down the facts in that way is really, really refreshing. And like I feel like you must be so bored about speaking about the GB News, interview, but like watching that, anybody watching that would be is able to understand you, because you speak in a way that is so clear. And like, I honestly, when I watched it, I just couldn't believe just how you didn't even waver. Like,
it was incredible.
You were so articulate, but also so clear that this is what I mean. Anybody from anywhere would be able to watch that and understand that and to digest that. And I think what you're saying about, other politicians and, people in those roles, they don't speak the language. I don't know, there's almost like a disconnect with that language. So to have you, a young woman like yourself, be able to just like articulate yourself like that to a woman like Suella Braverman, oh my God.
So for those watching who don't know what's going on, right? GB News, it's a right-wing platform.
Yes,
right, okay, there you
explain,
go.
Explain. You explain, because I was asking her before we started, like, how did that actually come about?
So just my experience of it, doing my usual, I see GB News, I see this incredible woman next to an older bloke and an older woman. And it was literally a micro version of what Kneecap are getting from the system. It's like two giants.
Yeah.
Fiona just...
Honestly.
Like, it was a representation of that. And
she wiped the floor.
They were shouting over her, and it was like, let the youth speak. Like, and that to me summed up bigger parts. But the way you handled it was incredible. Can you just tell everyone what GB News is and what go on there? Because that created quite an impact, right?
Yeah, GB News is a very, very right-wing news channel. And I think it's existed maybe for 2 years or something like this. And the presenters are very openly, consciously political, right? And I'll say something which is maybe a bit controversial, which is that in some respects, there's something I like about it more than the BBC and Sky. Because if I, not that the BBC would ever let me on, probably, but if I went on the BBC and I went on Sky News, they would feign neutrality when in reality they exist to promote the ideas of the establishment. They exist to promote the interests of capitalism, of Zionism, and defending the genocide. But they feign that they're being neutral and that actually, if I was there, you're crazy and you're radical. At least with GB News, they're not pretending to be anything other than what they are, which is that they represent the interest of Zionism and also and capitalism and right-wing politics in general. And so in some respects, you're going to have a more honest conversation because they say exactly what they think, which is that the genocide of the Palestinians is somehow justifiable. And so I can contrast that with what most people actually think, which is that, no, it's not. And we can see through this is the other thing, like the lies and the propaganda that the mainstream media has promoted about Palestine, but also in general, for decades, no longer plays the same role in society because people are just so disgusted by by everything. So they just don't trust media present, they don't anything. So I think that what's interesting about GB News, not that I want to go on it all the time at all. Please stop calling me GB News. I don't want to go on it all the time. But in certain circumstances, depending on the topic and depending on the person it's against, I'll go. Because we don't have access to politics. Like I did this debate with Suella Braverman, and it's like, no ordinary person ever gets the chance to look such an important politician in the face and say, you're a liar.
She literally said,
you're a war criminal.
Didn't stutter, you're a liar. You said it twice. Yeah. You're a liar. And then you said it louder. You're a liar. I think everybody vicariously just was like connected because that's what we all think. Of course.
No matter what your political stance is on this thing.
Of course.
Yeah. These people are liars and they're rotten and people hate them and they live in such a bubble. I really think right now in Britain, like we're living in a very explosive time, but that explosion could go in different ways. There was like the racist riots last summer. There's something brewing and it can go in a different direction. And unless someone channels it, an organization, a party, a movement, a musician, unless that's spoken to, it could go in a dangerous way or it can just dissipate.
Yeah, we don't want it to. We don't want to lose it.
And like what I would say you were saying about these people in the music industry who don't speak out, whether it's through fear, and if it's through fear, I want to reach out to those people and say, what are you afraid of? Actually, we have the potential to build something here. And you could even play a role in that. And that's such an amazing thing. If you have an ability, if you have a talent, if you have a space, use it. But we've got to give confidence to these people. Some people need to be shamed, 100%. Some people need to be built up and say, actually, these, people will support this. I really strongly believe that. And I think if you really believe in what you're saying, then you'll do it. If, for example, if you're a musician and a label says to you, no, you can't do that song because it's rubbish. If you really believe in it, you're going to do it anyway. And the same is true for me at the side of the street with a megaphone, or if I'm in a GB News interview, I believe 100% what I'm saying until I'm proved otherwise. And I think that's what people want. People don't want to be at home in their bed scrolling, seeing a genocide and feeling alone, feeling like they're going mad. They're desperate and they're yearning out for community, for organization, for a sense of belonging. That thing about identity in Liverpool 100% exists, but that can also quickly be shattered. There's so many places in Britain that have been decimated. The community, whether it's youth clubs being shut down, whether it's mining industries being shut down, whatever it is, people want a sense of belonging and community, and that can be offered in lots of different ways.
So many different ways.
I think this is the thing, like technology as well. It's like we all have our phone and our account and my brand or whatever. like blah, blah, blah. And it can sometimes feel quite singular. And that's an ideology. That's capitalism, right?
100%.
In its basic form. 100%. Me, my brand, fuck everyone else, I'm getting to the top. Yeah. Anyway, back on course. Sometimes me and here by myself going, feel alone, even though I'm speaking on the behalf of we. One of the reasons I've been so vocal is because I've seen what's happened to my guys. Second, I'm sitting here with people who're too scared to speak. So I'm like, you know what? I've got no tentacles in a label. I ain't got a booking agent. My manager is a G. She's got me regardless. You can't take anything off me because you've got nothing. I've got no tentacles in that world. The fact I even have to think about that is a massive problem alone. That said, I am able to probably speak on the behalf of more people than it seems. That's one of the reasons I do it. But at the same time, it's kind of like just feel very singular. And my parents are from unions and they're always talking about unionship and, you know, a unified energy or community. And I think that if we as a community, whether it's like you and your dance music community, like the more people that can rally together, it feels like a safer space to actually talk about what most of us think anyway. So there might be some sort of activation in that way presented. For example, if people are too publicly scared to share their opinion because they think they might get ostracized or shut down, is there a way that it can be done communally on a certain day? I'm just trying to think of resolution how to add to this thing, because right now it's like it's rolling, but it can't stop. Because Palestine represents way more, sadly, than a genocide, as we spoke about. It speaks for so many people in a different way. And I think, like you said, they can't crumble it. So I'm trying to encourage people. I don't want to be mad at people. I'm just saying, it's going to be all right. Do you know what I mean? You can do this. I've done it. You've done it. I'm still here. Don't buy that bullshit. It's not actually real. They make examples out of them, so we're shocked. But 90% of us can carry on. So it's just about enabling, isn't it? And creating a community together so we feel together and then we feel safe. Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. And I think, like you said, there's so many different tactics that can be used, whether it's like via your art, whether it's via a megaphone, whether it's what you did in terms of like, you know, what you were saying before about, you know, you want to speak to these musicians, you want to have a conversation with them. I don't doubt that you would do that in a heartbeat because you've gone out into the street and you've spoken to people and you've knocked on doors. Like, I've seen it. I've followed your journey in the last, like, since that interview. I've been so interested in just like your approach and how important just like being able to speak to young people is, and kind of like what you said, like really fostering this kind of like energy and you understanding and wholeheartedly knowing that this is for something bigger, that I don't even think you necessarily want to be like, you don't want to be at the forefront of it. Like we were talking about, there's been a documentary made about when you were in the election campaign and it was filmed a year ago and you had your premiere 2 weeks ago. And she was, I was so embarrassed, like watching you, because it was all about because you like what T was saying, like you stand for something bigger, but right now I think we need your bravery to kind of be the catalyst effect to hopefully inspire many other people to come forward. And I think, you know, your kind of like awareness and importance, particularly when it comes to teaching and educating young people, I think is so important, because I was having this conversation with my friend the other day and we were talking about like the national curriculum, and I think she said something like, oh my God, like imagine whenever we decide to have children, like, you know, they're going to learn about this in school. And I said, excuse me? And I said, you think they're going to learn about Palestine in school? We're not even able to learn about it now through like every facet of Western media. You think that the government, like who it basically writes a national curriculum.
This is when we under genocide.
Exactly, like are going to put this in. It's going to be up to us, like us as people, to be able to install this knowledge and this reality of what has happened in history, what has happened before them. Hopefully, God willing, by that time, we will see a free, like God will, like I can only hope and pray. But also, I'm friends with Palestinians. I have a good friend in Liverpool who's a very proud Palestinian Scouser called Haneen, and she is like the main person, the head honcho at Scousers of Palestine. I've never seen strength like that. I've never seen strength like the strength of the Palestinians, like how inspiring it is to even be around her presence, but also just like in general, like the things that we see in people that we don't even know from videos or, you know, all of these things online, their strength and also just like their approach. Even when I came to see the gig for Gaza at Brixton Academy, and it was the Palestinian ambassador that spoke, and he spoke in a way that was so powerful, so just like reaffirming, but also realistic but positive, and that defiance is like the heart of Palestinians. And if you've been around them, you would know. But that gig in particular is similar to what you were talking about. It was a big gig organised for a purpose with loads of artists in alignment. And it was brilliant. And I'm so glad that I went. I'm so glad that I went to that. And I'd love to be able to see more things. By the way, of that scale, I'm not talking about, like I said, the grassroots clubs in Liverpool, like, you know, the 200 capacity venues. Obviously, that's natural because it's intrinsic to their identity as well in terms of like being a grassroots venue. But these bigger entities, these huge spaces like the Brixton O2 Academy to kind of be like, yes, we're going to host this and we're going to proudly host this. And we're going to get a big range of artists to come. And it was amazing.
I think
it was
we should
so good.
organise one.
I think we should.
I think
I've got something bubbling, which I mentioned to you before. So we should all link up.
Yeah.
Because I also think it's not even just about like just DJs and respectfully music. I want to be able to organise something to do with like educational access and film and talks and panels and like basically make it like as multidisciplinary as possible. And I think that will connect with people a lot better. And I think education has to be at the core of that. And it can be kind of like distributed in different ways, through art, through talking,
mediums,
through conversation. And I think that's actually what's going to land on people a lot better. But yeah, we'll talk after.
You ran for election.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that then. So what political party do you represent?
So I'm a part of a party called the Revolutionary Communist Party.
Cool.
But last year, when there was a surprise general election announcement, which was just at the height of the Palestine movement, there had been these encampments at the universities of Palestine. And I remember I was at Queen Mary University at the encampment doing a teach out on, and then there was this announcement that, Rishi Sunak's, whatever. And it was this kind of, and then it kind of organically came up. Well, how should we engage in the election and all this kind of stuff? And then due to a strange concoction of events, I had this expanded profile. And in the encampment, people were like, maybe you should run.
Oh, really?
It was like this kind of organic thing that
The people decided, though. The people decided.
And ultimately, I had to, decide as well, consciously, right, okay, is this something? And so I ran as an independent. But as an open revolutionary communist, right? and we did this mass door knocking. And it was surreal. I'll tell you, I knocked on the doors of people who were Reform voters, but I had some of the more positive conversations with them than I did with anyone who was interested in Labour or the Lib Dems or anything like this. Why? Because a lot of those people were furious. They were fuming. They were so angry. And I would open the door and I would start by talking about Palestine. And this guy said to me, I don't care about Palestine. I can't pay my rent. I can't, in all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, I get it. And we had this long conversation about why that is and why the rich are getting richer and why the NHS is underfunded and why the rent is so high and all of this kind of stuff. And we had actually a really positive conversation. And at the end, he was like, I'm still going to vote Reform.
Yeah, but the dialogue alone is amazing.
And it was like, because there was this just absolute disgust and anger.
And you must have some crazy level of patience.
But
you do to have and engage in those kind of conversations.
You have to listen to people. I mean, there's some people, look, and in regards to Reform, whatever, there's some Reform voters I would never speak to. They would never speak to me.
Yeah, come on, sis. Let's be realistic.
They would never speak to me. Facts. That's true. But there's a layer of people who are just furious that they've been left behind.
Yeah, big time.
They hate politicians. And Nigel Farage says, yeah, I can see what's happening in your life. He says, okay, it's the fault of immigrants. That's a lie and that's wrong. And that has to be exposed all the time. But most people don't relate to politics where they watch what a politician says every day. They relate to a feeling. It's kind of like music. Yeah. They feel something when someone speaks. And for some people, Nigel Farage or Trump, or you've got all these right-wing demagogues who, especially when it comes to the working class, they say, I see you. And there's all these like liberals and they're just false and they pretend that they're few, but they're not. And there's an element of truth to that. Yeah. Those people, Nigel Farage, he's like private school. He's the epitome of the establishment. Yeah. And yet he's been able to speak to people. And I think that there's something that the left actually has to learn from that. It's also this thing of this sense of someone's fighting for me. That's what I was saying, like, kneecap, yeah, we're going to stand our ground and we're going to fight for the politics that we believe in. And Nigel Farage is like, all of the media are attacking me, but I'm going to say what I think. And it works because it resonates with people. So we have to be fighters as well. But that can look different. Like, I'm not a shouty person, probably. But hopefully, I'm embodying a politics that is fighting for people. And that's why I would say it's not really about me as an individual, though of course an individual, a personality, it plays a role, right? Like it plays a role in how people connect. But ultimately, what's much more important is the content of what you're saying. And so with that reform voter, although in the end he did vote reform, but we had a conversation because there was something we could connect on, which I would say is that capitalism is a system which puts profit above all human life, which is destroying the planet, which is causing a genocide, which is causing a cost of living crisis in Britain today. He wouldn't use those words, but the content of what we're saying is actually the same.
The root is the same.
The root is the same.
I remember being outside a bougie club once in London and someone mentioned the word communist and this woman was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Right. And there is definitely a dirty painting of the word from an agenda. I've grew up with parents like that, so I understand its ethos. Are you able to break down in as simple as possible forms the ethos of communism?
Yeah. I would say it's the opposite of capitalism.
And
what I
what's
mean by
capitalism?
that, I would say capitalism is a system based on profit where things are only built, things are only invested in if a certain group of people are able to make money out of it. The majority of people under capitalism have to work in order to have an income, right? They go to work, they gain an income, but that income is based on a small minority of people, what I would say is the ruling class, people who own the means of production, who give people jobs, pay them an income in order to work. That is most people. Most people are actually working class. There's various degrees of what those conditions are. But ultimately speaking, it's actually the majority of people. Communism is a system where the economy is based on need and not profit. It's based on the idea that actually we have all of the resources we need in society to house everyone, to feed everyone, to clothe everyone, to have adequate healthcare. You think about the vaccines and the medicine that we have that isn't given to people if those who own the vaccines can't make a profit from it. That's an insane way to live, and it's dragging humanity backwards. So communism is a system where, one, the economy is planned on the basis of need and not profit, where if we need to build 1 million council homes in Britain to house people, we will do so because we actually have the construction materials and people and labour to do that.
We don't need another coffee shop. We don't need
Yeah.
We don't need another block of new build flats. We don't need another coffee shop. Like
another Westfield.
We don't.
Yeah. And it's a system where everyone actually has it's more democratic because how do we decide what is needed? Through mass participation of all people. I think that, and I don't think that is that radical.
No,
actually, I think what's extremist is a system where this minority of people have such extraordinary wealth that is only possible on the mass exploitation of the majority that exist in society. And you take the question of the climate, it's literally destroying the climate. And so, yeah, for me, communism is about a society built on need and not profit, a society where people have a say over how their lives are run, how their community is run. And that is a more natural way for humans even to live. I mean, humans historically, the first kind of humans lived in a kind of primitive communist lifestyle, right? The way that we existed was you would, farm enough food just to sustain yourself and share it communally in your clan. And then that was it. At a certain point, we were able to develop more than was the very beginnings of private property, even the concept of this part is mine, this land is mine, this house is mine. That is something that developed over time. Like we haven't always existed. And then once private property was created, then you needed to defend that private property. And this is where the concepts of the state come in. Like it's very interesting to think, because what I would say about capitalism today, or any society that exists, is they will tell you that this is it. This is that human nature means that everyone is greedy and that everyone just wants to protect themselves. And therefore any kind of communal style of living is not possible. But one, I would say that's a lie. Actually, historically, humans have lived in a very communal way. And also, human nature, if it even exists, can change and is reflective of the society we live in. Greediness does exist. There are a lot of greedy people in the music everywhere. But why are they greedy? Because that's how the economy is set up. If you want to make it, you've got to be like that. So it's kind of not even about individuals and their morality. That's why for me, there's a clear goal to what I'm fighting for, which is to transform the economy. The ideas that we have, the morality we have, the way we relate to each other, I don't think it's just a random product of our minds. It's a product of the environment and the economy. And so if you transform the economic base of society, you'll transform how we relate to each other, how families are set up, how humans form relationships. And I don't think that's as far away as people might think. I think we live in a revolutionary, tumultuous time. And I hope that if there's enough people with the right politics, we'll go in that direction. Because people can't live. They can't live in this society. People are dying, like every day, whether it's through the most extreme example, like a genocide, or whether it's slowly through being overworked in the NHS or as a teacher or as a bus driver, or it's their mental health, or it's the smoke in London, or this whole system is like rotten, and it's rotting the way that we relate to each other. It's rotting the earth, but this isn't it. Like, I actually have a very positive view, I think, of humanity, which is that I believe fundamentally people can organize themselves in a way where we could run society for the betterment of everyone. I think that's true human nature. If you think about when a disaster happens, people come together to clean if there's like a flood, people come together, or when there's a horrible attack, that is real human nature, I think. And I will find any avenue I can, whether it's fighting someone on GB News, or it's here, or it's at a music festival, whatever it is, to prove that, that collectivity, that what you said earlier about we've got to create a space for people to feel safe, absolutely safe, but also strong. People want to feel strong. They want to go on the offensive. They're like, we've had enough. We've had enough of politicians. We've had enough of people, living their lives off the back of us. And yeah, we have a world to win. In the election, I used to say, we have war criminals to bring down, and we have a world to win. The world is beautiful.
That's a bar.
That's and we've got to be positive when we say that. Otherwise, there's enough negativity out there, right? Give me something to fight for.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't just be against, be for.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's my spiel.
No. I'm literally like, we're transfixed.
Yeah.
In it.
I literally think that is it. That summed up everything.
I know.
You're a G.
Would you ever run again? So you're Stratford and Bow.
Yes. Yeah.
And I found it very interesting.
Why?
Bow. Do you know, like, the historical context that an area like Bow has in terms of like its music like the birthplace of grime, which is rooted in anti-establishment 100%. DIY ethos. They weren't allowed to all of like that mindset, this kind of thing of like, the likes of people like Genius who ran Rinse that were literally doing it just from like their flats, and like it was so organic, and we spoke so much about authenticity of just like a community of people essentially coming together, and a music and a demographic that was highly demonized from like mainstream. Also, the fact that it was called grime, it was never supposed to be called grime. Yeah. That is basically what labels just started calling it. They didn't know what it sounded like, and it was this like big mishmash of just like sped up garage, wobbly, dubstep, like all of these influences, because majority of these men would have been jumping on and spitting on jungle and drum and bass before that.
As well,
and then house kind of came over from America, and then we started speeding it up, and then it became garage, and like the garage kind of like scene was a little bit more like, a little bit more like
dress up,
bit more
fancy.
dressed up, whereas like the jungle stuff was still a little bit more kind of like that proper underground. But there was this movement happening, and I don't know why, but I mean, I got asked to go and do a lecture in at Oxford University, and at the time I was like, I don't know why I've been asked to do this, and I don't know what I could possibly say or what I could talk about. And then I was like, let me talk on something that I know, and I did a whole presentation on the kind of like the connection that I believe that the punk movement and the grime movement have had, and how it's like socio-political kind of just like impact, how that's kind of like shaped more kind of like musical movements. But I couldn't believe that like I don't know, that there's a connection there.
Between
you
Fiona and Wiley.
Yes. I mean, like, there's a connection with like you being the candidate for an area like Bud.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And like its foundations, and there's a history there of resistance, but also hope and rebellion and representation. And I think, yeah, it's all kind of like intrinsic. And I think that's a mad connect, and maybe something a little bit spiritual there. Yeah. You know?
I think would I run again? I would say that I don't even know what the world will look like in 6 months, let alone a future general election. There's so much you can do outside of electoral politics. And actually, during the election campaign, one of the things I said, which I think is honest, even if I'd won as an independent MP, that's one MP, right? Up against a whole system. I'm not going to lie and say that would have changed everything. But what I would have done is use the platform every single day in Parliament to say the truth. What are you doing? How are you committing a genocide? How are you attacking the working class in this country every single day? But spend more time outside of Parliament, actually in workplaces, in unions, in community, to build power amongst people themselves, that is where the most powerful force in society is the working class, when it's organised and when it's conscious of its power and when it's taking back what is rightfully theirs. That is what I want to facilitate. And you can do that outside of Parliament, 100%. Maybe even
Fiona,
better.
get back outside with a megaphone, please.
I know. We need to get Fiona at the Fezzies.
Yeah, literally.
We do.
No, for real though.
We actually do. And also,
Listen.
there's a, like you said, there's this big like crossover, and there's this big like awakening, and it feels, as much as it's dark and there's a lot of despair, there's, like you said, there's the strength. And I think there's enough of that feeling to be able to galvanise more people, and also people that it's not even a case of like shaming people or shunning people for, like, the time is now. So
Yeah,
let's go.
But that's the point, and that's one of the reasons I was so keen to get you in here. And thank you. Honestly, man, when I see them things, I think hope.
Yeah.
And it feels hopeless. See you on GB, I say, yeah, that's for us, you know.
Yeah.
You every weekend, shouting the dancers with your things. I appreciate you. You're like the future, you know. I'm an elder. I'm 41, bro. Look at me. Shaving my
Hey, they
beard.
say life begins at 40.
Yeah, it does, but I'm still an elder. So you too, thank you.
Thank you.
Pick up yourself. Keep firing the blaze the fire. Steeze Factory Settings. Fiona Lali, the G33.
Woo!
AKA the GAIA, the Gaia from Girls Don't Sink. Till next time, big up this end.
You're in the Steeze Factory now.